The lawyer didn't even say my name, just skipped over it like I didn't exist. That was the moment I realized I didn't just lose my father, I lost the last piece of hope I had left. I sat there, silent, tense, on the edge of a stiff leather chair in that polished law office, pretending like my heart wasn't about to burst out of my chest. The air smelled of cologne, old paper, and expensive wood polish, but none of it masked the discomfort crawling across my skin. My older brother, Jake, leaned back in his seat, legs stretched out, grinning like he already knew what the will said. He probably did. He was always Dad's shadow, the one who followed the rules, went corporate, wore his success like a badge of honor. To his left sat my sister, Brianna, perfect, poised, entitled. She didn't even glance at me. Her legs were crossed, purse in her lap, fingers lazily tapping against the leather armrest. That signature smirk on her face, it wasn't new. Jake and Brianna weren't just siblings, they were the favorites. And me, I was always the afterthought. Mr. Harris, our family lawyer, adjusted his glasses and opened the file. His voice was steady, neutral, but my ears were buzzing so loud it was hard to hear the words. Per the last will and testament of Thomas Miller. Jake gets the house. Brianna gets the investment accounts. Then silence. I felt it. The pause. The awkward one that comes before bad news. Mr. Harris cleared his throat and unfolded a smaller envelope. There's a personal note for Nora. He read it aloud. To my daughter, Nora. You never amounted to much. That was it. No money, no memento. Not even a photograph. Just 7 words. 7 brutal, final words. My stomach dropped. I felt the blood rush from my face. My body went cold. Jake didn't even try to hide his chuckle. Brianna leaned toward him and whispered something, her hand covering her mouth, but her eyes flicked toward me, amused, mocking. My cheeks burned, but I didn't let them see the tears forming. I forced my face still, expressionless. Inside, I was crumbling. Was that really all I was to him, after everything? I thought of the times I'd shown up despite being ignored, the times I'd helped, supported, waited for a sliver of approval. I thought of the nights I stayed on the phone with him when no one else bothered to call. And this was how he said goodbye? I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped across the floor, sharp and jarring. I stood up, calmly, quietly. Every nerve in my body screamed to yell, cry, do something, but I didn't. I nodded once at Mr. Harris, didn't say a word to Jake or Brianna, and I walked out, not just from the room, from the lies, the hierarchy, the silent rules I was never allowed to question. As I stepped outside, sunlight hit my face, and the tears I'd been holding back finally welled up, but I didn't let them fall. That was the moment I stopped trying to earn a place in a family that never wanted me to begin with. I wasn't angry, not yet, but something inside me whispered, this isn't over. 3 months later, I would walk back into their lives, and I'd be the one holding the power. People always said I looked like my dad. Same eyes, same stubborn chin, same sarcastic half smile when something annoyed us. But somehow, I was the only one he couldn't seem to love. Growing up, I was the youngest, and for a while, I thought that meant something special. I thought I'd get the extra hugs, the gentle talks, the protective hand on my shoulder. But I learned quickly that in the Miller house, love was transactional. Jake, the oldest, was practically a clone of Dad. Sports, straight A's, internships by 17. He was the blueprint, the one who did everything right. Brianna was the polished one, homecoming queen, college honors, married rich by 25. She was Dad's bright star. He said that once at a dinner party, right in front of me. I remember laughing like it didn't sting. And me? I was the one who colored outside the lines. I studied art, not accounting. I worked with nonprofits, not firms. I freelanced, painted, took on random design gigs, whatever paid the bills. Dad never said it directly, but I knew what he thought of my life. Temporary, unimpressive, software. He used to say things like, when are you going to get a real job? Or, you're not still doing that artsy stuff, are you? Sometimes I'd lie just to make the conversation easier. Tell him I was applying for office jobs, that I was looking at corporate options. His face would finally relax when I said things like that, like he was relieved I might become someone he could understand. But I never wanted that life. Not for me. Still, I tried. God, I tried. I showed up for birthdays. I called on holidays. I was always the one who cleaned up after dinner while Brianna scrolled on her phone and Jake disappeared into the den. And even though I was barely acknowledged, I held on to this ridiculous hope that one day he'd notice. That maybe he'd finally say, "I'm proud of you, Nora." But now, I knew that day would never come. After the will reading, I didn't go home. I couldn't. I drove around for hours with no music, no destination. Just me, the hum of the tires, and this ache in my chest that wouldn't let go. It felt like grief, but not just for my father. Grief for all the years I wasted trying to matter to people who had already decided I didn't. At some point, I pulled into an empty parking lot and just sat there, staring out at nothing. My phone buzzed a few times, probably texts from Brianna or Jake, pretending to check in just to keep appearances. I didn't answer. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror, eyes puffy, lips pressed tight. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. I whispered, "You're stronger than this." But even my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. That was the night I realized I had nothing left to prove. Not to my dad, not to my siblings, and definitely not to myself. I wasn't angry yet, but something deeper had started to form in the silence. Not rage, not revenge, just a stillness. And buried inside it, something sharp, a shift I couldn't explain. Something was coming, and when it did, it would change everything. The days after the will reading were hollow. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. But something in me had gone quiet, like a light had been shut off inside my chest. I moved through the world like I was on autopilot, brushing my teeth, watering the plants, answering emails with that same empty smile I'd perfected for family dinners. I didn't talk about the letter, not to friends, not even to myself. I just kept hearing the words, "You never amounted to much," over and over, and not just hearing them, feeling them. Like they were branded across my skin, reminding me with every step that I didn't belong in my own bloodline. Jake didn't even follow up after the reading, not a single message, no gloating necessary. He already had everything he wanted. Brianna sent a one-line text, "Hope you're okay." I left it on read. I think part of me kept waiting to wake up, to realize it was all just some terrible misunderstanding, that I'd find a voicemail from Dad explaining everything, that Mr. Harris had mixed up the paperwork, but nothing came. I spent a lot of time walking around the apartment barefoot, trying to keep myself grounded. The wood floors were cold, the kind of cold that crept up through your soles and reminded you, you're still here. You still have to stand up. One night, around 2 a.m., I sat at my desk trying to force myself to work, some minor rebranding job for a local cafe, but I couldn't focus. My hands hovered over the keyboard, unmoving. That's when I remembered something Mr. Harris said, almost offhandedly. "Your father left you access to the storage unit off I-89, probably just old tax records, but you're listed as the sole contact now." At the time, it felt like a consolation prize. Now, it felt like a breadcrumb. I grabbed my keys without thinking, threw on a hoodie, drove with the windows down, air whipping my face like I needed to wake myself up. The place was exactly how I remembered it. Gray metal doors, humming fluorescent lights, the faint smell of rubber and concrete. The manager barely looked up as he slid the clipboard across the counter. One signature later, I was standing in front of Unit 14B, key trembling slightly in my hand. When I rolled the door up, the overhead light flickered once, then buzzed to life. It was packed. Old furniture, stacked boxes, a dusty coat rack I remembered from the foyer when I was 12. It looked like time had folded itself into this tiny room. Most of the boxes were labeled with Dad's usual handwriting, invoices, receipts, tools, photos. I almost turned around, but something caught my eye. A box near the back, smaller, neater, labeled in red ink, "Private Legal." My breath hitched. I don't know why, but my heart started racing. My hands felt clammy. There was nothing particularly dramatic about it, but my gut told me this mattered. I crawled across the clutter, knees pressing into old rugs and cracked boxes, until I reached it. The cardboard felt oddly warm, familiar even. I opened the lid. Inside, a single sealed envelope, yellowed, worn, and on the front, in that unmistakable handwriting, Nora Elise Miller. My full name. No jokes, no cruelty. Just my name. I held it like it was a heartbeat, and for the first time since the will reading, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. I held the envelope in both hands like it was made of glass. It felt heavier than it should have. Not physically, but in meaning, in weight, my full name, in his handwriting. Not a nickname, not a cruel joke, just Nora Elise Miller. There was something sacred about that. Strange, after everything. Like maybe this envelope had been sealed before all the resentment, before the silence, before the final 7 words he left behind. I sat down right there on the dusty floor of the unit, legs folded beneath me, the buzzing of the overhead light the only sound in the world. My fingers trembled as I peeled the flap open. Inside was a folded document, several pages thick, clipped together with an old brass fastener. The first page made my stomach drop. Property transfer agreement. I read it again, slower this time. He had transferred the deed to the house, Dad's house, the house Jake now claimed as his own, directly to me. Not just the house, the land it sat on, the outbuilding behind it, the small patch of commercial property attached to the side yard, all of it. My name, my signature, in blue ink, Dad's signature, in black. 2 witnesses, notarized, filed, 3 months before he died. I pressed my hand over my mouth, trying to breathe. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some rough draft or unfiled will. This was real. This was legal. This was mine. The house that Jake moved into. The land Brianna was planning to develop. All of it. Mine. I sank back against the cold metal wall, stunned, confused. 100 thoughts raced through my mind like wildfire. Why didn't he say anything? Why hide it? And then another thought crept in, one that planted itself like a seed and wouldn't let go. Maybe that letter wasn't the whole truth. Maybe that wasn't all he meant to leave behind. Maybe somewhere, beneath all the disappointment and silence, my father had seen something in me they didn't, something worth trusting. Because what he left in this envelope wasn't an insult, it was power. And now I had a choice. I could confront Jake and Brianna, tell them the truth, demand what was mine, or I could wait, quietly, patiently. Let them celebrate a victory that wasn't theirs. Let them brag and plan and redecorate, completely unaware that the ground beneath their feet, literally, no longer belonged to them. And then, when the moment was right, pull the rug out from under them. The thought made my lips curl into a smile I hadn't felt in weeks. Not bitter, not loud, just controlled, intentional, satisfying. For once, I wouldn't be the one begging to be seen. I'd be the one holding the paperwork, the facts, the deed. And when I walked back into that house, they'd have no idea what was coming. 3 months. I waited 3 whole months. Not because I was unsure, not because I was scared, because I wanted them to settle in, get comfortable, decorate, renovate. Post their little new chapter family selfies on the porch I used to sweep every Sunday. I wanted them to believe they'd won, and they did. Jake moved into Dad's old office and turned it into a cigar lounge. Brianna knocked down a wall in the dining room and started planning to convert the backyard into an outdoor bar space for her summer events. It was like watching strangers play house with something that didn't belong to them. Only, it did belong to me. Every brick, every window, every square inch of soil in the backyard. Mine. The morning I returned, the sky was perfectly blue, clean, sharp. The kind of morning that looks innocent but has something brewing underneath. I pulled into the driveway like I owned the place. Because I did. Jake's truck was parked where Dad's used to be. Brianna's Range Rover was halfway on the grass. I straightened my jacket, tucked the deed folder under my arm, and walked up the path like I wasn't the same girl who had walked away in silence 3 months ago. This time, I had a voice and paperwork. Brianna opened the door before I could even knock. She looked surprised, but not in a worried way. More like I was a solicitor she didn't want to deal with. Nora? She blinked. What are you doing here? I smiled politely. Is Jake home? She hesitated, clearly confused. He's inside. Why? Because I'm going to need both of you to sit down. Her eyebrows pulled together. Excuse me. I stepped past her into the foyer. Jake was on the couch, phone in hand, feet up on the coffee table like he owned the world. When he saw me, he raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect to see you here. Yeah, I said, dropping the folder on the table in front of him. I figured you'd say that. He glanced at it. What is this? I didn't answer. I just sat across from him as Brianna came around the couch and leaned over his shoulder. She started reading first. Then he did. Their faces changed almost in sync, brows furrowed, eyes narrowed, and then silence. Jake flipped through the papers like he was trying to find a loophole, a misprint, something, but there was nothing. Notarized, filed, legal. Their smirks vanished. You're lying, Brianna said softly, but there was no conviction in her voice. No, I said calmly. I'm not. Jake tossed the folder onto the table like it burned him. This can't be real. It's real, I said, and legally binding. Silence again. Then I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. You've got 30 days to vacate the property. My lawyers already filed the paperwork with the county. You'll get the official notice next week. Brianna looked pale. Jake looked like he wanted to throw something, but I didn't give them the satisfaction. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the door. No yelling, no drama, just power. Before stepping outside, I turned back and said, "Oh, and just so you know, Dad did leave me something." Jake raised his eyes. I smiled. Everything. The house is quiet now. No heels clicking on tile. No arrogant laughter bouncing off the walls. No condescending voices filling the kitchen like noise pollution. Just quiet. And it's beautiful. I sit in the same chair my father used to read in, looking out the bay window at the front yard. The leaves have started to turn. Reds, golds, a little orange where the sun hits just right. It's peaceful in a way I never got to experience growing up in this place. Back then, peace was a thing reserved for everyone else. Not anymore. It's been 3 weeks since Jake and Brianna moved out. They didn't say goodbye. I didn't expect them to. The last time we spoke was in that living room, when I told them they had 30 days to leave. They left in 21. And honestly, I don't feel bad. For years, I lived under the weight of their judgment. Their smirks, their subtle jabs. I thought if I worked harder, proved myself, earned their approval, maybe then I'd finally be accepted. But now, I've stopped needing what they never intended to give. And Dad? I think about him more than I expected to. Some days, I still feel the sting of that letter. You never amounted to much. It hits harder than I'd like to admit. But when I found that deed, when I saw my name on something he chose to leave only to me, I realized something. Maybe that letter wasn't his final word. Maybe it was the mask he wore till the very end. The father who couldn't quite say, "I love you," but could quietly sign over everything he owned to the daughter he never said it to. Maybe that was his apology. Or maybe it was his way of admitting he was wrong. I don't know. I probably never will. But what I do know is this. I didn't need an inheritance to prove I had value. I didn't need their approval to know I mattered. And I didn't need a single cent to earn my peace. Still, having the deed to this house, having the land they all thought belonged to them, that was justice. But what came after was healing. I kept Dad's reading chair, his record player, some old photos from the storage unit, the ones where I'm actually smiling. I painted the living room the shade of blue he always said was too bold. I hung up my own artwork in the hallway. I turned the old garage into a studio, and for the first time in years, I wake up excited to work again. Not for validation, but because it's mine. My life. Space. My story. People say revenge is sweet, but honestly, peace is sweeter. Some people fight for revenge. I didn't have to. I just waited and let the truth do the talking. If this story hit you somewhere deep, share it. Someone out there might need to hear it too. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and unforgettable, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and stick around.